The galaxy had seen countless wars. Civilizations rose and fell, empires clashed in the void of space. Yet nothing prepared them for this. Across a vast council chamber, alien eyes froze on the trembling light of a holoscreen. What they witnessed defied every law of probability, every equation of survival. A species they had written off as primitive, refusing to kneel. The footage played again and again, fragile figures wrapped in thin suits, fighting in the cold vacuum with nothing but improvised weapons and unbreakable resolve. They should have surrendered. They should have begged for mercy. Instead, they stood their ground, a burned soldier dragging himself through fire just to shield his comrades. A pilot turning a maintenance craft into a weapon of precision. An engineer smiling grimly as he overloaded his own systems, willing to destroy everything just to deny the enemy victory. It wasn't technology that shook the council to silence. It was something far more dangerous. Defiance. The aliens whispered among themselves, their voices filled with unease. If these fragile beings could fight like this with scraps and desperation, what would happen when they fought with purpose? The galaxy had underestimated humans, and now it was too late. Would humanity's will to survive become the galaxy's greatest hope, or its darkest nightmare? If you're ready to witness humanity's terrifying defiance, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more epic HFY stories, and share it with those who doubt the strength of mankind. The research station. Horizon 6 drifted quietly in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. From a distance, it looked fragile, just a cluster of modules. Solar panels spread like delicate petals. To the Galactic Confederation, it was a primitive outpost of a primitive species. To the people inside, it was home. Captain William Hayes sat in the command deck, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug. He was no decorated hero, no legendary tactician, just a man doing his duty thousands of kilometers away from Earth. He stared at the star field, endless and silent, and wondered how long before humanity truly belonged among those distant lights. Down in the engineering bay, Gary Powell cursed under his breath as another power conduit flickered. He wiped grease from his face with the back of his sleeve. "We're barely keeping this place running," he muttered, though there was a tired grin behind the words. His assistant, a younger technician fresh out of training, laughed nervously. "That's what makes it fun, right? Nothing ever works the way it should." Powell just shook his head, but there was pride in his eyes. Humanity survived not because things were perfect, but because they improvised. In the medical bay, Dr. Helen Ward moved from patient to patient. Though tonight her work was routine, minor scrapes, fatigue, the kind of injuries that came from stubborn scientists refusing to rest. She paused at the viewport, watching the asteroids drift in their eternal dance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. Fragile, dangerous, yet full of promise, much like humanity itself. Meanwhile, Lisa Chen, the young flight officer, ran simulator drills in the hangar. The maintenance craft she piloted was small, clunky, not meant for combat. But she flew it like it was alive. Her colleagues teased her for training so hard when there was nothing to fight. "You never know," she replied with a quiet smile. Space doesn't forgive mistakes. Daily life on Horizon 6 was a mixture of exhaustion and hope. They were far from home, far from Earth's blue skies and green fields. Yet they carried the same spark of stubborn optimism. Birthdays were celebrated with ration bars lit like candles. Music floated through the corridors at night. Laughter echoed even when the lights flickered. They were ordinary people living on the edge of the extraordinary. But beneath that fragile normalcy, shadows stirred. The long-range scanners had picked up faint readings, unusual energy signatures. Dismissed as cosmic noise, communications with Earth had suffered strange interruptions, chalked up to solar interference. A few officers whispered uneasily in the mess hall, their voices low. "Pirates, maybe?" "No, just sensor glitches." "Then why are we running extra drills?" Captain Hayes knew better than to ignore unease. He had seen too much of humanity's history to take peace for granted. War had scarred their past. It could scar their future. As he reviewed the station's logs, he couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching them. And somewhere in the void, beyond human eyes, alien vessels drifted silently, predators circling prey. The crew of Horizon 6 had no idea that their ordinary lives were about to end, that within hours. Their courage would be tested in ways no simulation could prepare them for. For now, though, they lived. They worked. They laughed. Fragile, hopeful, unaware that destiny was about to knock on their door. because when the darkness finally came, it would come without warning. And the galaxy would learn what it meant for humans to fight not for conquest, but for survival. If you're drawn into this fragile calm before the storm, hit like, subscribe for more HFY stories, and share this with someone who loves epic sci-fi battles. The alarm came as a single sharp note, thin, metallic, impossible to ignore. Horizon 6's bulkhead sang. Red lights painted every face. The scanners had stopped being consensual. They screamed. From nowhere, the raiders arrived. Low, red-hulled ships like knives cutting the black. They did not announce themselves. They simply carved into the station's orbit and fired. Energy bolts seared through the silence. Modules flared. Glass turned to a galaxy of spiderweb cracks. Fear landed first. It hit like cold water. People moved in rehearsed chaos. Captain William Hayes barked orders with a calm that steadied a dozen frantic hearts. Seal compartments. Lock the hangars. Keep comms tight. Short sentences. Rapid commands. The crew obeyed. The training kept them from panicking. But fear was in their eyes. The animal, hot and immediate. Boarding pods hissed against the hull. The raiders wanted men. They wanted supplies. They wanted whatever a primitive outpost might hide. They expected surrender. They expected compliance. They were wrong. Lieutenant Lisa Chen watched the approach from a cramped cockpit. Her maintenance craft was not a warship. It had never been built to fight. The raiders assumed she would flee. She did the opposite. Pause. She dove toward the blind side of the largest raider. Hugging angles the attackers had not accounted for. She released a plume of fine particulate. Maintenance dust, bearings, stripped insulation, a cloud that glittered like a storm of stars. The raider's sensors choked, blinded. For a beat, the pirate ship was a hulking, inert thing in the void. It was a small, stupid thing. But in that small, stupid thing lived a human stubbornness that refused to quit. Engineering smelled of ozone and burnt solder. Gary Powell stood with a hand on a control rack, eyes flat with fatigue and resolution. "If we don't fry their comms, they'll pick us apart," he said. He tapped codes into the ancient power array. The plan was brutal. Trigger an electromagnetic pulse designed to cripple incoming electronics at the cost of Horizon 6's non-essential systems. It would fry their own diagnostics. It would wreck equipment they'd spent months repairing. He did it anyway. Better broken than dead. Space does not forgive mistakes. The raiders adapted. Their boarding teams pierced the maintenance bulkhead. They poured in, sleek, alien forms in armored suits that glowed with predator confidence. Human hearts stuttered. The first firefight was ugly and close. Metal met metal. Hands bled. A scientist, a young technician named Mira, who had annotated comet samples with more care than she'd held a rifle, died holding the door open so others could run. Her last look was not panic. It was a small, stubborn smile. Whisper, "Go." Anger followed fear. It came hot and personal. Humans learned every way to make a disadvantage into an edge. They turned corridors into traps that would defeat sensors, manual trip lines, weighted nets, gravity anchors that would send a boarding party tumbling into a wall of tumbling wreckage. They fought with elbows and old-school metal projectile, crude, brutal, effective. The raiders were astonished. The invaders expected to pick over survivors. Instead, they found themselves hurled back into their ships with losses they did not expect. The council watching the holoscreen recorded it all. Alien voices threaded through the observation post. Confusion, annoyance, a rising brittle fear. Primitive, they had labeled the humans. That label began to peel. The raid on Horizon 6 was a skirmish. It was meant for plunder. It became a lesson. 2 days later, the lesson escalated. The raiders rallied. A proper fleet arrived. Larger, meaner, armed for war. Their target, a lunar colony. A domed city of 5,000 souls who had no idea. The small raid would be the spark for something much larger. The moon's domes glowed under an indifferent sun. Children still learned constellations on the central plaza. Bakeries still sold stale bread that tasted like home. Fragile life at the edge of silence. When the warships opened up, the colony's shields screamed. The first blasts found their decoy generators and melted them like paper. People ran to shelter. The sky was a furnace, but the colony had secrets. The generators that burned were theater. The real power sat deep, buried beneath basalt and rock, protected, hardened. Colonel Alan Foster had ordered redundancies, designed by men who had read too much history and assumed they would one day need to survive it. When the visible plant went dark, Hidden relays woke with a slow, terrible hum. The dome's emergency protocols engaged. Fighter pilots, not glorious ace portraits, but quiet, relentless technicians of flight, launched in craft that hugged the lunar horizon. They used gravity like a partner, darting through crater walls, crawling along wavelengths where the alien targeting systems could not lock. Major Eric Powell's squadron turned their paper-thin fighters into blades. Hit and run, draw, break, repeat. 3 cruisers dove too low. Gravity did the rest. The human strategy hardened. Deception, sacrifice, precision. They moved like a people remembering how to survive centuries of hardship in one relentless present. Then the secret weapon unfurled, a thing of thousands, micro-drones. The swarm. Each was simple, each expendable, each programmed to do one job: overwhelm point defenses. They poured from hidden bays like a released cloud. Small explosions, tiny engines, a billion tiny wills. The Raider flagship's sensors were swamped, their turrets clogged with targets that came at them like a living tide. The flagship stuttered. Its firing pattern broke. Systems that had smelled like invincibility now coughed and sputtered. Hope surged. The colony held. But hope was a fragile currency. The swarm worked, for now. The Raiders diversified tactics. They began to test electronic countermeasures. The human advantage was not permanent. The victory tasted of iron. And then news arrived. The Raiders were not an isolated band. They were a vanguard. Reports pinged the orbital nets, clusters of warships massing beyond the gas giants. A larger power had taken notice. A message hummed through command channels like a bad omen. They fight differently. The Confederation's observers muttered the same phrase in their own tongues. Translating wonder into worry, fear rose again. Not the immediate, teeth-gnashing panic of a boarding party, but a cold, wide dread that brushed across an entire species. This time, fear sharpened into fury. It bound 1,000 people into a single will. It made engineers work nights on systems never meant for war. It pushed pilots to modify, to risk, to fly things that should have buckled under stress. It coaxed a desperation that tasted like courage. There were losses. Ships burned. Habitats were scarred. Friends died with their hands on the controls. Mouths moving in commands that saved others at the cost of their own life. Each loss carved anger deeper into the bones of those left behind. Defiance took root. It spread. By the time Earth's fleet readied a proper response, the mood had changed. People who had begged for peace months ago now whispered plans for strikes, for taking the fight to those who thought them prey. Strategy rooms filled with maps with quick, bright lines showing traps, ambushes, and the soft places in alien systems humans could exploit. The human movement was no longer purely reactionary. It was a rising thing. It had purpose. And yet, pause, the observers watched, incredulous. How had a species mocked for its primitive tech and fragile stations become a force that bent tactics and turned scarcity into weaponry? How many more would learn this lesson the hard way? A ship volunteered for a mission that smelled of near certainty of death. A small insertion team would slip out, plant a virus, and run. They would try to unmake enemy coordination before the next wave arrived. They signed up like men writing letters home, with short notes, small jokes, and an acceptance of what might come. It was a brave, terrible answer. The ship left the perimeter in silence. No one knew at that moment if it would return. Whisper, would it change everything? Or doom them further? If you want to see how that suicide mission unfolds and how humanity's defiance becomes a storm, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with fellow HFY fans. The real payoff is coming up. The stealth vessel Shadow drifted through the void like a ghost, its hull wrapped in sensor-absorbing alloys that even the Confederation's most advanced ships could barely detect. Inside, the crew sat in silence, every breath measured, every heartbeat too loud in their own ears. They knew the odds. They knew what was waiting beyond Neptune. 4 humans floated in insertion pods, crammed with equipment scavenged from captured alien technology and their own makeshift inventions. Lieutenant Peter Russell checked the small device strapped to his chest. Dr. Chen's virus generator. It was the only weapon that might cripple the enemy fleet's command systems. One chance, he whispered. That's all we get. His team nodded. No one spoke of survival. They spoke only of mission. The Draxian base loomed ahead, a sprawl of wrecked ships welded together, glowing with repair torches and bristling with cannons. The enemy thought themselves untouchable, safe in the shadow of their gathering armada. They didn't know 4 fragile humans were about to crawl inside their heart. The pods detached. Silence swallowed them. Drifting like fragments of debris, the team slid into a forgotten airlock. Alien patrols passed within meters, their armored feet echoing in the narrow corridors. The humans pressed themselves into shadows. Breath held until the patrols were gone. At the central node, Russell connected Dr. Chen's device. The progress bar crawled across his cracked data pad. 90 seconds. A lifetime. His palms were slick, his body trembling. Then the alarms began to scream. The Draxians had noticed something. Boots thundered toward their position. "Cover me," Russell said, voice hard. His teammates drew crude projectile weapons. The first alien rounded the corner, shield humming, and went down to a hail of metal slugs. Crude, primitive, but effective. The virus completed its upload. The station's lights flickered, then burned red. False commands spread through the Draxian network like wildfire. Fleets waiting beyond Neptune received garbled coordinates. Their formations broke apart, scattered into ambush zones they didn't know existed. "Mission accomplished," Russell gasped. "Extraction now." The team sprinted, chased by roars and gunfire. One of them, Corporal Jensen, stumbled as plasma fire tore through his leg. He shoved the others forward. "Go, you have to go!" Russell shook his head violently. "We don't leave anyone." With 2 teammates bracing Jensen, they limped through collapsing corridors. Draxians closed in from every side. And then, pause. The shadow appeared on sensors, bursting from the dark with engines blazing. Chen's stealth systems were spent. They had come back anyway. The insertion team dove into the bay as the Shadow's weapons, a mix of human, cannons and scavenged Draxian beams, unleashed a storm. The stealth ship shuddered, hull cracking under fire. But it survived long enough to punch free. They were alive, barely, but the virus had already done its work. Far from Neptune, near the orbit of Jupiter, Earth's battered fleet braced for annihilation. They were outnumbered. Their ships were smaller, weaker, patched with alien parts and duct-taped repairs. Yet when the Draxian vanguard arrived, they were disorganized, confused, splintered. Admiral Catherine Wilson stood tall on the command deck of her flagship, her uniform torn and one arm in a sling from the last engagement. Her voice was calm, steel wrapped in exhaustion. "All ships, engage, hold the line!" For Earth, the battle was chaos. Human ships darted like knives, swarming with brutal coordination. They used asteroids as cover, flanking from impossible angles, drawing the Draxians into gravity wells and radiation storms. The enemy had superior weapons, but humans had creativity. Desperation made them brilliant. Major Eric Powell's fighters skimmed the edge of Jupiter's storms, pulling alien cruisers into dives they couldn't escape. One by one, massive ships fell into the gas giant's crushing embrace. Powell's last transmission was a roar of static. "We dragged them down with us." His fighter disappeared in the clouds, taking 2 enemies with him. On Earth, civilians huddled, in shelters as ground-based weapons hidden beneath. Observatories powered up. Energy lances cut across the void, striking Draxian ships that broke through the fleet's screen. Humanity had turned every hidden corner into a weapon. But it wasn't enough, not yet. The Draxian flagship still loomed, massive and burning but unbroken. Its cannons tore through human lines. Admiral Wilson's ship shuddered, consoles bursting into flame. She refused to fall back. "Target their command systems," she ordered through smoke and blood. "If they take me, keep firing." Then came the twist. 6 orbital stations, half-built, untested, activated simultaneously. Energy beams lanced out, converging into a lattice around the Draxian fleet. Modified from stolen alien tech, it was something no human should have been able to build so quickly. And yet there it was, a cage of light stretching across the black, trapping the enemy inside. The Draxians fired everything they had. The cage held. On the observation post, the Confederation delegates rose from their seats in stunned silence. "Impossible," whispered one. "They should not have this." The trapped fleet faltered. Ammunition ran dry. Engines sputtered. The humans did not destroy them all. Instead, Admiral Wilson opened a channel to the enemy commander. Her face, bloodied but defiant, filled their screens. "Surrender, withdraw, or none of you leave this cage alive." The alien commander spat fury. His fleet had been humiliated, undone by a species that should have been ants beneath their boots. And yet he saw no escape. One by one, Draxian ships powered down. The galaxy held its breath. In that silence, the image burned into history. Fragile human ships, scarred and patched, standing victorious around a fleet that should have crushed them. Soldiers dead, colonies scarred, but a fire alive in every survivor's eyes. Humanity had done the impossible. They had not just survived, they had triumphed. And the question whispered across the stars was no longer, can they endure? It was something far more haunting. What happens when these fragile beings decide to fight for more than survival? If that gave you goosebumps, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more epic HFY battles, and share this story with those who doubt the strength of humanity. Silence followed the battle. Not the silence of peace, but the hollow quiet that comes after. Screams have ended, and the smoke still lingers. In orbit, Earth's fleet floated like wreckage stitched together by willpower. Hulls scarred, lights flickering, medical shuttles weaving between ships as stretchers carried the broken and the brave. For every cheer of survival, there was the sob of a name missing from the roster. Humanity had won, but at a price carved deep into its bones. On the lunar colony, families emerged from shelters to find their domes scorched. Power systems shattered. Children clutched their parents' hands, wide-eyed at the stars they now knew held monsters. Dr. Helen Ward moved through rows of wounded, her hands red, her voice steady, whispering comfort where hope was thin. She had saved lives, but her eyes carried the weight of everyone she could not. In the command chamber, Admiral Catherine Wilson stood unflinching despite the sling around her shoulder, her face pale with exhaustion. Around her, maps of the solar system glowed, dotted with enemy wrecks. The victory was undeniable, yet her gaze never softened. "We've revealed ourselves," she murmured. "The galaxy knows what we are now. There will be more." She was right. Across the stars, the footage spread. In secret councils of alien empires, leaders replayed the recordings again and again. They saw fragile bodies hurl themselves against impossible odds. They saw humans break every model of rational warfare. They saw them fight harder for each other than for themselves. And in that, the galaxy glimpsed something terrifying, a species that should have been weak, but was not. In the Confederation observation post, Ambassador Zorax delivered his final report. His words were measured, but his voice betrayed unease. "We cannot categorize humans as primitive. They adapt too quickly, too violently. They fight without logic, and yet with purpose. They sacrifice willingly, even eagerly, and that makes them unpredictable, dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous force this galaxy has yet encountered." Another delegate whispered, almost in fear, "If this is how they fight for survival, what happens when they fight for ambition?" Back on Earth, amidst the ashes of victory, ordinary people lit candles in broken homes. They mourned their dead, repaired what could be repaired, and prepared for what lay ahead. No speeches could erase the cost. No banner could cover the scars. Yet there was pride in their grief, the knowledge that they had faced extinction and refused to bow. Humanity's place in the galaxy had changed forever. They were no longer an overlooked species clinging to a small blue planet. They were a warning, a question mark, a shadow on every council's horizon. Allies or enemies, every empire would now have to decide. And as Admiral Wilson stood at the viewport of her battered flagship, watching Earth rise against the black, she spoke words that would echo for generations. "We are not the strongest. We are not the most advanced. But we endure, we adapt, and when the void tries to break us, we burn brighter." For the first time in galactic history, humanity had stepped into the stars not as prey, but as survivors who could not be broken. And somewhere in the cold halls of distant worlds, alien voices whisper the same thought, unable to silence the chill it carried. The humans are coming. If this ending left you with goosebumps, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more cinematic HFY stories, and share it so others can feel humanity's fire too.